Welcome to Integrating Participatory Culture into Library Services for Teens, a presentation for Jennifer Velasquez's course on Programming and Services for Young Adults at San Jose State University. I'm Daniel Torres. I'll be introducing this collaborative presentation. My fellow presenters, Khalil El-Bati, Judith Cha, Sarah Hansen, and Simon Clifford, will discuss strategies for implementing participatory teen library services, look at some examples, consider participation as a modern form of literacy, and assess the challenges and new metrics that accompany this new approach. Before we get into the scholarly side of things, think back for a moment to when you were a teen. Which of these would you have preferred? Sitting through a lecture by an expert adult on space exploration, or creating your own hands-on space exploration project and bringing your friends along? And which of these would you have preferred? Having books or online materials assigned to you, or choosing your own books and your own sites and leading your own social literary exploration into space? Basically, would you rather have an adult do it for you, or would you rather the adult facilitate while you do it for yourself? It's pretty obvious when you think back to being a teen that most teens have a lot more fun doing their own thing. And now, think about the same situation as a librarian or an educator. What are teens learning when they sit through a lecture, as opposed to leading the investigation for themselves? Sure, they're learning the expert perspective from the lecture, but when they do it themselves, they get to learn leadership, teamwork, and independent thinking, all very valuable skills in the modern world that you don't get from the classic pedagogical setup. This is participatory culture in a nutshell, and while it's not perfectly applicable to everything in the modern world, in this presentation we will show that it is the best model for library services for teens, and that it really represents their best prospect for success. What is participatory culture? The classic expression of it comes from a paper whose lead author is Henry Jenkins. Although he was inspired by the rise of internet culture, it's pretty obvious that these tenets can apply to any kind of social information situation. A participatory culture is one in which there are relatively low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement, strong support for creating and sharing one's creations with others, some kind of informal mentorship, a belief among members that their contributions matter, and a degree of social connection felt by members with one another. Although not every social structure can be or should be participatory, we believe that library services for teens are the perfect place for participatory culture for two main reasons. First, as Jennifer Velasquez relates from hard experience in her book Real World Teen Services, teens are at a tricky developmental stage of defining and asserting their own identities. They are often rebellious, contrary, and tribalistic. No matter how well-intentioned any library collections or programming are, teens are much more likely to engage with them if they are participatory. That is, if librarians respect teens, let them initiate the ideas and implement them, and then bring their friends along. Without that kind of participation, no teen library services are likely to succeed. And second, as technology continues to permeate society and make it ever more participatory, libraries must teach participation as a form of literacy. They must let teens learn to initiate, lead, work in teams, pursue their passions, and investigate for themselves. Unless they do this, they are failing teens who will not learn the kind of participatory literacy they need to go out and succeed in the internet era. It's easy to see how the internet gave rise to modern participatory culture because it is a neutral, all-purpose medium that empowers anyone to create their own affinity space. That is, a gathering of like-minded people exploring a shared interest or passion. But that description also happens to perfectly fit the library, an all-purpose public information and entertainment space that empowers everyone equally, without any particular didactic agenda, like what teens sit through every day in school. The library should embrace its function as an affinity space, and be a platform to facilitate whatever teens are interested in, and let them develop their own collections and programming, whether in person or online. Next, Khalil El-Bati will discuss strategies for implementing participatory culture in library spaces.
Hi everyone, this is Khalil, and I'm going to be talking about strategies for libraries to consider to encourage teen participation. From my research, I found that libraries are having a very narrow discussion about social media, Web 2.0, or creative technologies, or technologies that people use to create digital media and content. For the most part, libraries are only discussing social media as a marketing tool to market some of the programs and services that they already provide, or they're making traditional library programming virtual, such as Storytime, or finally, the policy discussions that they have largely surround issues of privacy. As you can see, there is little to no discussion as to how to facilitate participation in some of the activities that Jenkins and others have discussed. While there have been a number of articles that cover library programs and activities that encourage participatory, that encourage some of the participatory activities described by Jenkins and others, there hasn't been, or there's been very little writing on more of a conceptual approach to the strategies that libraries need to employ or consider. In 2015, Wynne published an article entitled "Establishing a Participatory Library Model." In this article, she identifies 3 broad characteristics of what she calls a participatory library. It's my hope that I can draw out the strategic implications of each of these categories being community, empowerment, and experience. So we're going to begin with collaboration. Now, what Wynne calls we're going to begin with community. Now, what Wynne calls community, Jenkins and others has described as collaboration. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap between Wynne's discussion and the discussion of Jenkins and these other authors. Jenkins argues that collaboration may be the most radical element of new literacies. They enable collaboration and knowledge sharing with large-scale communities that may never personally interact. Now, Wynne identifies 3 subcategories to what she calls community. These subcategories being connection, sharing, and peer support. This means that participants, or in this case teens, need to be able to connect to each other. And I think we're focusing here specifically on virtual or digital connection. They need to be able to connect with each other online, share content that they've created, and through peer support groups, develop and learn more technical knowledge about how to create more advanced pieces of media content, and also learn more on whatever subject or topic that they're involved with. To facilitate this, there are a few strategic implications that libraries need to consider. Those are technologies, professional development, and integrating library services into online communities. So in regards to technologies, teens need to have access to the software and technologies that will allow them to connect with each other, but also to create media content. But to pull this off, however, they need to have library staff who are trained in or have experience using this technology. In a discussion on makerspaces and learning labs, Ko and Abbas found that right now there's no established industry-wide standards for librarians when they become facilitators or managers of learning labs and makerspaces. This is relevant here because in learning labs and makerspaces, that's where librarians and patrons and teens are using a lot of these technologies. And until industry-wide standards are established, librarians and libraries need to pay really close attention to what they're learning and what they need to be learning. For example, Ko and Abbas found that something that's new is that librarians more than ever are finding themselves in teaching positions. And so librarians need to be given the pedagogical skills to teach teens how to use this technology. The last strategic concern that I want to make about community and collaboration is that while it's good that libraries are using social media and digital technology to make their services virtual, they need to do a little bit of a shift or a pivot from thinking about the programs that they already offer and instead ask themselves, how can they serve creative online communities that are already out there? They need to move from an inward focus to an outward focus and integrate their services and consider what kind of new services they could provide some of these creative communities that exist online. This will put them in the mix or in the middle of a lot of the sharing and the peer support groups or online communities that are developing. Moving on to the next category identified by Wynne, we're going to discuss empowerment. Now, Wynne says that empowerment is composed of three subcategories. These are authority, partnerships, and their beloved portmanteau, producage. So library patrons, or again, teens specifically, need to be given the authority to control their own activity or determine the activities that they want to engage in. And this can be accomplished through partnerships with librarians, where they take on some of the skills and responsibilities that are traditionally reserved for the library professional. That needs to be shared with them. And in doing so, this will allow them to create the new digital media content that the authors or the theorists of participatory culture are calling producage. There have been a number of examples where libraries have facilitated empowerment. For example, Johnson, Clapp, Ewing, and Buehler discuss an instance where an academic library was approached by a student group, and the student group wanted to lead a seminar that would teach other students how to use software that where students could create new digital media and content. And so the library talked to the IT department and had the IT department install that software on the computers and then reserve the room and the space for the students to lead this training seminar. This is a great example where libraries open up their services and their resources for others to use. In another example, Cocciolo did a comparative study of two institutional repositories. One of them being a traditional institutional repository that relied on a set of hierarchical taxonomies, and the other institutional repository used or was designed on Web 2.0 principles. And so the organization of the research that was submitted to that institutional repository was organized around tags that the users could create. And he found that in this latter example, it allowed for more flexibility, and this flexibility was more desirable to the people who were submitting these articles to the institutional repositories, because it allowed them to design the organization of the information that helped the students that they were working with. So Cocciolo says that the Web 2.0 principles, the sort of flexibility that comes with it, encouraged the development of learning communities. And so libraries need to or could consider bringing in teens or users into organizing their collections and picking the books that they want and developing tags for the electronic catalog, or determining where in the library do they go. Are they in an accessible space for the teens? Another strategic implication is that teen internships and volunteering needs to be radically reconsidered. Instead of giving teens busy work, a teen internship or volunteer experience could be considered more of an apprenticeship or an experience whereby teens do some of this collection development work. The last category that Wynne discusses is called experience. And she says that experience is composed of space, both virtual and real, where the comfort of the user or the patron is a big concern. Now, Wynne's discussion from that article is limited, and so here I think it's a good time where we can sort of pivot to another discussion that other librarians and researchers have covered, and that is the four-space model discussed primarily by Jacobson, Rasmussen, and Scott Hansen. Now, while the name itself sort of gives away that there are in fact four spaces to this model, we're going to be focusing on two of them because two of them in particular are more relevant to the issues and concepts of participation. And the two that we're going to focus on are the learning space and the meeting space. Now, before I continue, I do want to say that these are not actual spaces. More so, they need to be considered as types of activities that libraries need to consider. They're types of activities that libraries should seek to facilitate. This is also a part of the discussion where we're going to shift away from some of the considerations about virtual or digital participation and consider more some of the real-world implications and real-world types of participation. So considering the learning space first. Now, the learning space should be taken as a flexible space and also a space that facilitates different types of learning experiences and teaches patrons or teens search and research skills that they're going to need. So to break this down a little bit, Velasquez, for example, argues that the learning space needs to accommodate different styles of learning, not just the private, quiet, individual study that is traditionally thought of as the experience in the library, but group or collective forms of study. And not just text-based study, but also, or not even just study, but learning, but also visual learning, auditory learning. That could also include music, for example. And so this means having space in the library that facilitates all of these different types of learning, or having the space be flexible enough where it can be changed to accommodate the different needs on a day-to-day basis. Jacobson, Rasmussen, and Scott Hansen, in their discussion of the meeting space, identify it as a space where both intentional meetings take place, but also where informal and casual meetings take place. They argue that the library needs to have a vibe or needs to have areas that resemble a study room or a business meeting room, for example, but also spaces that resemble more a living room or a cafe. And so to accommodate a lot of these different activities that take place, whether they're intentional meetings or whether they're casual and informal meetings, Jacobson, Rasmussen, and Scott Hansen say that seating is a big issue that needs to be considered. A lot of times in libraries you'll see either the group table or the individual recliner or chair, and they're all sort of in the same place. But it doesn't really, or rather, by allowing teens to rearrange the furniture to meet their needs, these different sorts of experiences can take place. And teens themselves then sort of take control of the library. And that's the sort of participation that we really want to encourage here. That's the sort of empowerment that we want to give them. Because the success of a lot of these strategies will depend on the extent to which teens are put in the driver's seat. To sort of sum up, this can be accomplished through teen internships or a teen advisory group, but they need to be put in touch with staff who are giving them the skills, whether it's search and research skills or whether it's the skills to create new and digital content. And they need to have the technology to be able to connect with each other and have these experiences and share and learn from each other. So concluding this section or this discussion on strategies for libraries to consider to facilitate teen participation, I'm going to turn over now the presentation over to Judy, who's going to discuss some more concrete examples of participatory culture in libraries.
My name is Judy Cha, and I'm going to be talking about participatory culture in libraries, focusing on tech-based examples. The first example of participatory culture in libraries happens at an Australian public library called the State Library of Victoria. In 2006, they launched an interactive web in which they encouraged teens, particularly males, who were seen as reluctant readers, to contribute content in response to books they have read. Teens contributed content in the forms of blogs, music, art, costume, and film. Now, this is an example of participatory culture according to Jenkins in the following ways. First of all, it's a website which is accessible to everyone. Any means of artistic expression is possible, making it easy for anyone to participate, showing there's low barriers to artistic expression and civic engagement. Second, everyone with internet access can access the web, allowing the teens to share their creations with others. Third, there's some type of mentorship that occurs as some teens are more adept at using the medium such as art, film, and writing and can pass on their knowledge to others. Fourth, since the participants know that their work is going to be showcased publicly, they have natural pride in their work, showing they believe their contributions matter. Finally, this medium allows teens to feel socially connected as the content is digital and they can receive feedback through comments. The next example of participatory culture is an example that happens at a high school in Georgia called the Creekview High School. The students use NetVibes, which is a digital platform, to create research guides to organize their information sources. Now, teens can customize their sites however they like using NetVibes widgets and themes. And students can also embed web code to display videos. This is an example of participatory culture according to Jenkins, because first of all, students have all the tools to add content to the sites and customize them however they like, showing there's low barriers to participation. This platform is web-based, allowing teens to share their work with each other. Students who master the learning tools to create their sites are encouraged to help the teachers and librarians instruct the classes. This peer-to-peer mentorship falls into Jenkins' definition of participatory culture. The students are encouraged to keep a learning blog in which they discuss how they're mastering the standards. This keeps them purposeful in their work and allows them to feel their contributions matter. Finally, students share their knowledge through the library blog or YouTube channel, allowing them to feel socially connected. The last example of participatory culture happens at a North Carolina Public Library's multimedia production studio called Studio I. Teens produce a video podcast about the summer reading program, and this video is uploaded to YouTube. This is an example of participatory culture according to Jenkins because, first, this venue is open to all teens, showing there's low barriers to participation. Next, their commercial was uploaded to YouTube, allowing them to share their creation with others. Third, there's some type of mentorship that occurs as knowledge from experts is passed on to novices, as some teens would be more adept at using the multimedia production studio to produce the podcast than others. Fourth, it takes self-initiative to participate, showing teens must believe their contributions matter in order to be motivated to participate. Finally, their content is uploaded to YouTube, allowing them to feel socially connected, as viewers can comment or pass on the link to others. To conclude, technology is natural for teens, and school and public libraries can adopt tech-based forms of participatory culture to provide spaces for teens that allows them to express themselves in ways that are engaging, collaborative, and social in nature.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and for this section of our presentation, I'm going to focus on the link between participatory culture and literacy. I'll be discussing how participatory culture functions as a new form of literacy, how this fits in with the scope of teen library services, and some strategies for providing literacy instruction in a library setting. New literacies refers to the set of skills needed to function in the current media landscape. Prior to the rise of participatory culture and Web 2.0, literacy was all about the skills consumers needed to think critically about what they were reading, listening to, and watching. In a participatory culture, members are producers and consumers and require a new set of literacy skills for success. These skills aren't just about reading and writing, they're about connecting to a community and taking part creatively. These new skills outlined by Jenkins include play, or experimenting with one's surroundings to problem solve, performance, simulation, appropriation, which is the mixing and sampling of already created content. The popularity of memes among teenagers springs to mind when I think about appropriation. It also includes multitasking, distributed cognition, and collective intelligence, which are the abilities to expand your own capacity through the use of technology and through pooling knowledge with others, judgment, or determining the credibility and reliability of media, transmedia navigation, networking, and negotiation, which is the ability to enter different groups by respecting new perspectives and adopting different cultural norms. Participatory culture and its effect on media shifts the concept of literacy from individual to one of community. Brian Myers, the web manager and teen librarian at Wilmette Public Library in Illinois, recognizes the importance of participatory culture as a form of literacy. When WPL began offering open video gaming events, he noticed a subculture of teens with an interest in gaming, anime, fan fiction, and fan art developing. Myers noticed this affinity group forming naturally and worked with them to form a game design club. While Myers recognized the literacy and learning benefits of playing video games, he and his fellow librarians felt that by putting teens into the role of media designers, by giving them the opportunity to design and create their own original games and interactive media, they could help them activate new learning. The teens took this idea and ran with it, holding both formal meetings where members presented their work and informal ones where groups of teens huddled around a laptop to troubleshoot. They began running the gaming tournaments, hosting design contests, managing the website, and even presenting to the library board. In this participatory model, learning and the learner are more flexible, and the process of making meaning is valued over the outcomes. Teens who do not have these new literacy skills will find themselves at a disadvantage. In their 2005 paper for the MacArthur Foundation, Jenkins and company described the development of new literacies as critically important for success as creators, citizens, workers, and learners. However, access to technology tools is not enough. Teens need mentoring in order to develop these new literacies. Without explicit mentoring and literacy skills, teens are vulnerable to three core problems. The first, the participation gap, refers to the inequality around teen access to media technologies. Although simply providing access to devices and apps can't teach skills, teens who have regular access to tech do have an advantage over those who do not. Jim G. describes how teens with higher socioeconomic status benefit more from digital media than their poorer counterparts, claiming that well-off parents spend more time assisting their children in using technology, teaching them to challenge themselves, persist past failure, and engage in personal interests. If we are able to provide that same kind of coaching, librarians are well positioned to bridge this gap in literacy skills. And while it may be true that teens have more experience in new media environments, like social media, than their parents, teachers, and librarians, it's still important to engage them in critical analysis. The assumption that teens are prepared to reflect on their media experiences and can synthesize what they've learned from participation is called the transparency problem. Even teens who use media well as a resource for expression and participation can benefit from literacy coaching. For example, the Stanford History Education Group recently found that students have difficulty discriminating between paid advertising and news reporting. In the age of fake news, teens need mentoring to be able to separate credible from non-credible and commercial from non-commercial. Teens also need coaching to develop the ethical norms needed to engage in participatory culture, where the lines are blurred between content creators and consumers. Teen creators will need help learning to navigate issues of quality, reputation, and online ethics as they engage with Web 2.0. Teens who don't have access to quality guidance and supervision may experience this ethics gap. In order to help teens participate meaningfully in the new media landscape, we have a duty to work actively with them in developing new literacy skills. Hopefully, best practices for literacy instruction in a library are determined by the needs of local teens. However, university librarians Lorelei Rutledge and Sarah Lemire have provided 4 literacy instruction strategies that can be adapted to any library setting. First, Rutledge and Lemire suggest cross-curricular integration. In schools, this typically involves the librarian working with content area teachers to embed literacy skills into classroom instruction and projects. Librarians can also integrate new literacy skills in a variety of contexts by looking for opportunities to embed Web 2.0 technology in programming, like Brian Myers did. He encouraged teens to progress from playing games to creating games, building a participatory culture, and promoting literacy skills. Librarians can also use new online technologies, particularly social media, to meet teens where they are and provide meaningful coaching through example. Focusing on formal instruction may cause librarians to miss opportunities to provide the kinds of mentoring that teens need. Rutledge and Lemire suggest using scalable tools and models for providing this mentoring. The simplest is to recognize opportunities for micro-teaching, times that teens interact briefly with librarians or library resources that come up naturally. This could be a personal interaction, an online chat session, or a resource posted online like a tutorial or a LibGuide. It's not easy to measure the efficacy of this kind of instruction, but it does have an impact because it meets teens in their time of need. The final 2 suggestions, providing personalized learning opportunities and opportunities to engage with participatory culture, go hand in hand. In a personalized learning experience, teens themselves are in charge of creating and sharing information. They may work on research that is personally meaningful or form a learning community with like-minded peers. Social media is also a valuable tool for creating personalized learning experiences. Rutledge and Lemire suggest using tools like Facebook, Twitter, Blogger, etc. to introduce teens to literacy skills and provide opportunity for teens to use these tools with one another to build on the skills. Web 2.0 has had a blurring effect on the distinctions between work and play and formal and informal learning. This creates opportunities for students to develop new literacies outside of formal classroom instruction. Libraries can help by facilitating the formation of clubs or affinity groups and by providing spaces that promote participation. These kinds of literacy instruction provided in tandem with opportunities for engagement in participatory culture allow teens to find, use, and create information. Teens who have the skills to participate are able to form new connections, experiment with creation and expression, and combine information and media to create content. They will have the literacy skills needed to participate fully in the new media landscape and in social, school, and work environments that are increasingly participatory.
Hi, this is Simon. In this final section, I'll address some of the concerns surrounding participatory cultures as well as challenges to their successful implementation in both real-world and digital environments. I'll also discuss metrics for gauging the success of a participatory culture. Jenkins et al. Identified 3 core problems to illustrate the need for formal education and pedagogy. However, they have been criticized for failing to address issues of ownership and exploitation. Participatory cultures do not exist in a vacuum. Online, they often grow around specific websites, such as YouTube and Tumblr. These sites may offer services useful to or needed by the culture, or they may simply serve as an established place for members of the culture to interact. Many of these landmarks of Web 2.0 are owned by corporate interests. Google owns Blogger, Blogspot, and YouTube. Yahoo owns Tumblr, News Corp owns MySpace, and Microsoft has stock in Facebook. These companies benefit from the cultures they host through advertising revenues, increased traffic, and brand recognition, and in some cases through control of user-created content. To create a participatory culture in a library environment, teen services librarians must change the way they think about service on a basic level. Traditional teen services are like children's services, where an expert librarian selects and presents experiences for teens. In a participatory culture, the librarian shifts the focus to teens themselves, reflecting their greater independence with agency in the planning and delivery of events and services. To make this shift possible, teen librarians must win the support of their administration. This can be difficult if past attempts at teen programming have failed, or if they are expected to justify teen services with a youth development model, providing services that develop skills and instill values in teens. While administrative support is important, the success or failure of a participatory culture for teen services is dependent on teens themselves. Such a service model can only work if there is trust between the library and teens. Teens must feel that the library respects them and will value their contributions if they are going to invest time and energy into developing programs. In libraries that have poorly served or disrespected teens in the past, this trust may be difficult to win. Unequal access is another barrier to teen engagement with the participatory culture. As discussed previously, a participation gap exists in digital participatory cultures, by which young people with high-quality tools and experiential opportunities are better able to access and engage with digital cultures than their peers. In a library environment, the participation gap may be more tied to issues of physical access and accommodation. A teen services librarian must assess how well their services enables participation from every teen in the community. Are teens who speak little or no English able to participate? What about teens with special needs and those who are house or hospital bound? There are limitations to a library's ability to accommodate every situation, especially given the value of spontaneity in a participatory culture, but librarians have a responsibility to ask who their services benefit and who they leave behind. Other challenges relate to teen librarians themselves. For many librarians, creating events and services is an enjoyable, creative part of the job. Giving up that creative role may be disappointing, but it is a necessary part of adopting a teen-oriented participatory culture in the library. There is a different sort of job satisfaction to be found in helping teens take charge of their experience. Further, the librarian must be aware of their position in the participatory culture. They are a facilitator, not a member. While a librarian can help activate the teen space and facilitate participation, a librarian that is too involved can become a hindrance. Due to the established social hierarchy, teens may defer to adults, and teen participants may make suggestions and plans based on what they think the librarian will like, not what they actually want to do. Perhaps the final challenge relating to participatory cultures is the question of how to measure their success. Quantitative approaches are insufficient on their own. Program attendance numbers do not convey the value of the services or the actual kinds of participation happening. Visser's model for measuring engagement on a museum website can be adapted to measure teen participation in a library environment. The model tracks 4 levels of interaction: reach, engagement, participation, and enthusiasm. Reach tracks every individual who visits the teen space, physically or virtually. Engagement measures the number of teens that attend programs or use services without participating in their creation. Participation measures the number of teens that participate in the creation and presentation of programs and services, and enthusiasm measures those who become active library supporters and spread the word to their peers. These metrics are useful for determining how and to what extent teens are participating in the real world and online. Such metrics should be paired with qualitative measurements, what teens achieved and what they learned by doing it, to robustly track the success of a participatory culture. Despite these challenges, libraries should strive to foster participatory teen services. Participation can teach and strengthen new literacies to teens. Participatory service is also appropriate to the diverse interests and greater independence of teens.